Now, I believe that the world is really on the move. And we often hear that and see that there is a crisis affecting globalization. I cannot agree personally, because I believe that we do not have anything like a globalization. We have the globalization of economic relations at micro level. We obviously do have a global economy, and each individual subject live their own predicament of global economy, and we don't have the so-called global government or governance. And quite obviously, those nations that are global, such as the International Monetary Fund or the World Trade Fund, although they are being affected by a given crisis, cannot take any decisions because of a series of rules that they have themselves established and that are convenient to all of the participants in this global game. So how to reach that global governance situation? Well, in the first place, we have to have rules that are acceptable to everyone. So we need to have a consensus between 200, amongst 200 national economies is impossible. Truly impossible. What we see is then the regionalization of worldwide areas. We have economic blocks that are being formed, and there is the so-called fragmentation or regionalization. But I do believe that that stands as the way leading to the so-called true global economy. We have to have regional blocks and regional economies that are effective and performing. There have to be effective contacts and links established by the different economic subjects. But then, if there is going to be economic efficacy and profit amongst these nations, only if and then this is going to happen, there is going to be a real global economy. Now, once we have done all this, it is going to be easier to, within the regional unions, to set up a network of relations and partnerships. We often hear criticisms against the transatlantic covenant and pact and the transactions at trans-Pacific level. Now, we know that there are many doubts as far as these initiatives are concerned, and we should never give for granted that they will be crowned by success. But all of these regional mega processes instead come along with a right principle. So it's right to have access and to have any such interregional projects. Then we know that the United States want to have a situation or a scenario of a transatlantic or trans-Pacific situation. But in Europe, we have all of the potentials for such a global project. Let me say that. Now, everyone is talking about that. Now, President Nazarbayev, who's leading the Euro-Asian Assembly, mentioned this at the United Nations, and Putin also did so. We know that this Euro-Asian trans-partnership is very much requested. So how to end up having it and how to develop it? Well, I said that it's going to be hard to have just one single partnership with the United States. You have to counterbalance that and have a second Eurasian partnership, because the United States tend to work on two different tiers, the transatlantic tier and the trans-European tier. So you have to work with us. You have to establish good relations with us so as to upright and balance your partnership with the United States. And all of us should not just simply work with the European countries, but also with Asia and Pacific countries and China. And we have to establish another partnership. And in that framework, then we may have a Euro-Asian partnership, which is a global one. It is absolutely important and critical to have two different tracks, dialogue tracks with the European Union and with the Asian Pacific regions. We started doing that in early times with Europe. This morning we had a wonderful, splendid intervention given and delivered by Romano Prodi. He is the one who started dialogue with the Russian Federation. Then he opened up for the economic space, and then we also thought that we could end up having a common space of the European Union and Russia plus the Euro-Asian partners. But unfortunately, then we never ended up having it. Now, within the European Union, once again, we've shared the words spoken by Prodi, but we are in a stagnation situation. So this is offsetting the active work in the so-called track of Asia and Pacific. Last year, in the year 2015, we signed a memorandum between the Russian Federation and the Chinese People's Republic for a series of projects of the European Economic Union, Euro-Asian Union, and the new initiatives for the new pathway or way of the silk. And yes, the way of silk seems to be a dimension, a logistic dimension. It's an infrastructural dimension, but it's much more than that. And we tend to say that we should start thinking how to build up a common economic space. This, I believe, is what is of paramount importance, because it's on that basis, on the basis of this European economic, Euro-Asian economic space and the Silk Way, it is going to be possible to find new approaches that are not just confined and limited to the Euro-Asian Economic Union and China. There are other parties that are interested, the Shanghai for the cooperation, ASEAN, and on the basis of any such blocks, such as Shanghai and ASEAN, and the European Union, it is going to be possible to create a new dimension, a transoceanic dimension, and the Russian, Asian, and Russian partnership is what will generate positive reactions on the side of our Asian friends. I keep going to that track or tier, but we should not just simply disregard the European one. We have a mandate, a full mandate, to start a dialogue with the European Union. We are ready to meet you. We are ready to go back to the idea of a common economic space. But we've had no reactions, no answers from our European colleagues. So Prodi was reading some statistical wonderful data. Practically, in the past 2 years, after the trading scandals, we know that the relations went down by 2 times and were curtailed by 2. And if we look at the data of 2016 and we compare them with the 2013 data, which is the correct thing to do, we see that imports and exports have almost halved. So it's like a plunge, like diving into deep nothing. And the quotas of our imports from Europe, again, all that went down by 41% and went down to 41%, are now equal to the imports from the Asia and Pacific areas, which is also equal to 40%. So this is why we should know that a vacant seat is going to be filled immediately. And the same applies to Europe. If there is no reversal of trend in a year or 2, it's going to be hard to reverse the trends, whatever trends we may be wanting to reverse. And according to Prodi, having a conference of that type is of paramount importance. We have to go back and switch back to dialogue. We have to talk of what brings us together, not of what's dividing us and separating us. So this is why the Verona Forum is so important and is such topical. What I really loved about Prodi's intervention is that we've seen that some bridges have turned into a battlefield, whilst instead we have to turn them into cooperation platforms. We have to build up this cooperation, Euro-Asian cooperation, and however absurd, however strange, I believe that this is the best moment ever. Europe was always taking its best decisions in hard times, complex times, and the very idea of Europe has turned into a reality, and it was debated for centuries, we know, but it turned into a reality only after the Second World War. That is when the European states, who were scattered on both sides of the barricades, understood that we had to go back to scratch and we had to go back to square one. We had to start again from economic cooperation. And in this very complex and highly difficult situation, we have to talk about European Union. Thank you to Tatiana Dimitrievna. I believe that I have to ask you a question. Strategically speaking, you're right. I agree with you. And we've seen that the participants also were nodding while listening. And I believe that in this audience, there are many people that agree with you. But at the same time, there are equally also other participants here in this venue who are wondering about one thing. We know that Russians and Italians have many things in common. It seems to be easy to make an agreement in between Russians and Italians and not between Russians and Germans, whilst instead the Russians have made agreements and entered agreements with the Russians only. So the real life practice and the real life has shown to us that it's easy to have a bilateral agreement among states. And when you were talking about cooperation between Russia and China and Shanghai and other organizations, we've seen that right now there is only a channel, a dialogue channel between China and Russia. And if only we could end up with an agreement, it would be much, much easier to have an agreement with Brussels and with Washington. So what to do next? Well, this doesn't seem to be a contradiction. I believe that in complex dialogues we have to have bandwagons. We have to have leaders. And I believe that it is important to have bilateral contacts among states. And this is something that is not going to be destroyed by integrative structures within the Euro-Asian associations. Whenever we happen to discuss with our counterparts and we talk about the new Silk Way, it's important to do so because by doing that, we are strengthening the Euro-Asian Union. And if we talk with our own colleagues about transportations and energy, we have to follow in the lead of those dialogues that have done so previously. Within the European Union, we absolutely do not want to have new dialogues destroying the integrative structures that were already existing in Europe. The European Union is now going through rough moments, critical moments, and we hope and we make you best wishes to overcome this moment. Now, who could be the leader within the European Union? We know that we've always had leaders such as France and Germany ever since the beginnings of the European Union. Then other states joined in. But it is very well to have things agreed with other countries, for example, with Germany maybe. For other things or issues, maybe the ideal partners could be Italy or Greece. And then when all of the European states join forces and make up their minds as to future decisions, I believe that is going to be an excellent thing. For example, Germans could take up a given field, Italians a different one again. And we know that business leaders, European business men, signed a memorandum supporting this common space, economic space, and they've been spanning from Lisbon to Vladivostok. So we have to make our governments, national governments, accountable for that, so that the joint European structures are going to be stimulated and wanting to have a dialogue